was reading an article and I actually tried it. They did an experience with someone from Gen Z and a millennial and a baby boomer.
Oh.
They were like, how do you answer the phone? How do you pick up the phone? How do you pick up the phone? Exactly.
Yeah, I saw this as well.
Oh, you saw it?
Yeah.
For the guy from Gen Z, he did this. Welcome to another episode with Five at Fintech Hive. Today we have with us Mr. Andrew Fawcett and Mrs. Nileena. Sorry. Welcome to Five at Fintech Hive. I'm gonna start off with question number one. We've talked off camera that this question is very hard, but we're gonna go with it and try to simplify it as much as possible. What is the Metaverse?
That's a good question, and it's a changing one. But basically, the fundamental concept of the Metaverse is it refers to a virtual world where we are interacting through avatars in a computer environment. But that's sort of the most basic version, right? And things that we would, it's sort of like the Matrix, but without the evil robot overlords. Or Ready Player One? Have you guys seen that movie?
No.
It's not Ready Player One at all, right?
Steven Spielberg is actually a leader in terms of Metaverse with Ready Player One and Minority Report. You've seen Minority Report. That's more that's the augmented reality. You know, Tom Cruise doing that stuff.
I've seen it.
Yeah. So the reason we're talking about it a lot is basically a year ago, Facebook rebranded to be Meta, and at that time they've said that the Metaverse is essentially the future. And so in terms of the next thing from mobile internet, it will be the Metaverse. So we started with our interactions on the internet being like emails and SMSs. We've moved into a more video, photo. The Metaverse is kind of the 3D next step of that. But it's not a particular technology. It's more, I think the term is more about how we're going to be interacting with technologies in that virtual space. So there's a lot of things, various things that will support it, AI, Internet of Things, those kind of things that will support us being in the virtual, immersed in space.
It's going to be a culmination of different types of technologies, essentially. So in the most idealistic sense, the Metaverse is essentially a virtual world that connects everyone, where you can actually, it's a 3D immersive virtual world where you essentially replicate the real world interactions that you have in a virtual setting. However, the Metaverse as it is now is just a bunch of different worlds that people have created, where it's not a centralized system yet. We hope that it will eventually, hopefully, become a centralized system like the internet is, for example. However, that's, it's at this point it's a distant future.
Well, I mean, we're probably talking about metaverses as sort of multiple platforms where companies are providing the platforms for the virtual world. And maybe the analogies at the moment are a lot like the streaming platforms, and you choose your point of interaction there through a particular platform. Ultimately, as I think there's the aspirational John Lennon imagined version of a world with no boundaries and things like that, given that it is a mechanism people investing in building these things, that the nature of companies is they have a return on the investment. So there has to be a reason for there to be a complete interoperability, and even sort of the current, the way that we may look at an example of what is kind of a metaverse starting point is things like Fortnite, where you have skins your avatar in a world where you can buy things and you can even buy Nikes and things like that. But at the moment, you can't jump from Fortnite into, say,
Call of Duty.
Well, yeah, or things like that. And that may come, but it requires cooperation and interoperability.
This was my question too. Has the idea of the metaverse just struck out of nowhere, and it was just, and people started like getting into it, or have we been shifting into it slowly throughout the years, and the main idea and component of, or the main idea of the metaverse has been there and it's just developed into what it is today, and hopefully it will develop more in the future?
My view on all the advancements that we go through in technology are that they're evolving rather than revolutionary, that we change overnight. So the metaverse is something that has been evolving and will evolve further, just as because it requires a lot of technology to support it, and that technology didn't exist, and it will need to have other things to go. But there's sort of, it started off in goes back to a sort of science fiction.
Yeah, Snow Crash, which was in 1992, which is when the concept of the metaverse was first introduced. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely not a new concept. It's just that I think technological limitations have kind of moved it, well, kind of delayed its implementation, I would say. And also, like Andrew said, it's the metaverse that we see now. The present day metaverse is very likely not the metaverse that you would see, say, in 10 years, because it's a constantly, like any technology, it's constantly evolving. So maybe in 10 years, the metaverse will actually reach its idealistic state where it's just one universe existing virtually, coexisting with the real world, where people, essentially interact boundlessly. And
potentially like 90% of what we call the metaverse now, we probably used to call the cyberspace.
Yeah.
Or could we say so? But it's that the main trait is that virtual world living alongside our real world.
Yeah. Especially the metaverse that's still accessible through browsers. It's still technically a Web 2 concept, not a Web 3 concept, because it's no different from, say, a Zoom call. But it's like we said, it's an evolving concept. So
and part of it is when you have in things like not just virtual reality, but the augmented reality, the things that.
So definitely, what we are seeing today is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yes. Well, so I mean, we don't even necessarily know what the iceberg is.
Yeah. So that's the problem.
The internet was around in the 1970s, and as a concept, as it took more life in the 1990s, and even then, it's different. So, this is the thing that you're recording us for a podcast about the metaverse in October 2022. That it's going to be used as evidence against us in the future about how wrong we were.
10 years from now, someone's going to listen to this podcast and be like, they had no idea what they were talking about.
Well, we had no idea back in the 2000s that the internet would evolve and develop to what it is today.
Exactly. And I think with technology, you never know how, when, in what way it's going to evolve, because technology is constantly evolving, constantly. So it's impossible for us to predict what could happen in the future. All we have is an idea of what we think may happen. Say if someone tomorrow resolves quantum computing, that could probably put the idea of the metaverse like heaps ahead of where it is now. But it's all just at this point, it's all just a maybe. We don't have any real, this is what it is going to be, conclusive,
something tangible that we can touch and
exactly.
Take it and to move it further.
And you guys probably can't remember life before the internet, but I mean...
I remember dial-up.
Our generation does. Now Gen Z, I don't know.
Yeah, but at the same time, just even the way use of smartphones have changed, and the power of smartphones and what you actually do, and whoever thought you would communicate mainly through WhatsApp or things like that. So it's really difficult to predict what the great thing is. As human beings, we're adaptive beings, and we take these things and adopting these things hopefully to make our life easier.
Hopefully.
But part of that is that the steps where there are leaps without necessarily being revolutions is you have the technology changes to support it. So at the moment, right now, the interface with the metaverse are the headsets in a lot of ways. And personally, I don't think I could be in one of those for 24 hours a day. But the technology will change, and or uses, or as I say, there may be side technologies that we didn't expect related to it that become integral to what we do.
I think the benefit that the metaverse has is that there are a lot of big players that support it. Say, for example, Meta, which would also help push innovation in that area forward, because people are now more, like you said, like it's suddenly blown up and everyone's super interested in what the metaverse is and how they can, penetrate the metaverse. So, and that's primarily because a lot of big companies have turned to metaverse as an option. So, because of that, there is a very good possibility that it could potentially contribute towards the speedy development of the metaverse. But again, I mean, it's all a maybe at this stage.
And it's not just companies, So Dubai has its metaverse strategy. So there's while it's hard to define exactly what it is, people are recognising that this is something that is going to be in our lives
space
and
to be
changing
watched.
that, and recognise that. But it's not saying that this is the specific thing you will be doing tomorrow.
So, since it's going to be something in our lives, and we're going to have to live with it, whether we like it or not, and in order to live with it, there has to be something with legalities of it. With the laws that are today and the legal system that is today, can we take it and make it as a base and build from it? Or do you think that new laws and new legal systems will develop and will emerge, which the metaverse community will build on it? Or will it be like just a mix of something new and the old?
More the latter. So it's basically what we do in terms of law is by its nature reactive rather than proactive. The laws respond to changes, and essentially at the most basic level, laws are basically the rules for the game of life about how we interact with our environment and that. And so when the environment changes, the laws will need to adapt to that, but it will be built on, we've got hundreds of years of legal theory around contracting and finance and things like that. It's not going to need to throw that out the door, but you are going to have to adapt to how things are done virtually. And it does raise lots of questions. So the challenge of the law, as it always is when there's a disruptor that comes along, is does this thing that needs to be regulated fit within the boundaries of the existing laws, or is there something that's being missed and we need to regulate for that? And so our job is to look at the issues and things like that, see how do the laws deal with it, is there something being missed, then that's what our governments and regulators respond to.
Yeah, so the first step, I mean, it's not an or concept, it's more of an and concept. So existing laws will be developed or broadened to cover the metaverse. However, eventually we may reach a stage where new legislation specifically addressing issues in the metaverse may need to be implemented. So the first step, and the step that we are at now, is to mold existing laws to fit around ideas of the metaverse. which is already happening. A lot of countries are opening up to the possibility of applying existing laws to metaverse. For example, in the UK, there was recently a case where it was a fraud that happened on the metaverse, and the courts assumed jurisdiction in this case, even though the offenders were not identifiable. They have basically adjudicated on it, which is it's not something that's common, but it is happening. And Andrew mentioned during his presentation as well that Hermes has filed a case against essentially copycat products on the metaverse. So I mean, the world is evolving to accommodate the metaverse. It's just that, as with any other instance, it's at this stage more of a reactive process. So we would now just broaden the scope of existing legislations, and once that's hit kind of a dead end and we can no longer do that, that would be when they would consider possibly legislating specifically for the metaverse. But I mean, that's again kind of down the line, not anything that's imminent, I think.
Yeah, it's not the Wild West.
Yeah.
There's, as I said, it's a virtual representation of the real world. So generally, a lot of the real world principles it's just how it works out. And there are some issues about if it is like the internet, if it's across borders, laws of their nature are jurisdictional by governments and things like that. And there's some issues of saying something that takes place in a virtual world with actors from different places, what laws are going to apply. And so there's some challenges, but it's not lawless.
Right. So my final question will be about the coexistence and the intersection between the digital economy and the metaverse. I'm not going to say is it saturated because we haven't seen anything yet, but where's the ceiling? Where's the limit?
Well, we are seeing things. So there are people buying virtual plots of land in the metaverse. You have Sotheby's setting up a virtual auction house and to sell NFT artworks, and it's just understanding what those things are changing, what are the speculations on that, but fundamentally, given that it's a virtual world and people will obtain goods and services through that, it does need to have financial technology underpinning that, whether that's regulated for the metaverse or regulated similarly with cryptocurrencies. Again, the non-fungible tokens, the NFTs will be the thing about. There's a lot of stuff that NFTs will be quite a big part of the metaverse because it's code that indicates ownership of things. So whether that's an artwork or whether it's to a plot of land, or it's the mechanism by which ownership passes and that. So and it's fundamental. One thing we haven't got into is like, how do you insure stuff in the metaverse? And so that there's because it's a virtual representation of our world, we will need to virtually have that economy and that interaction with that as well. So the financial technology is we've sort of talked about the metaverse as not being one technology, but it's sort of underpinned by a lot of things, and financial technology is clearly going to be something that underpins those interactions in the virtual world.
So I don't think there's really a ceiling at this point. I think it would be akin to more of a dark tunnel as opposed to a dead end, in that we just can't see what lies ahead. However, we do know that there is something ahead. I think especially in terms of digital currencies, it's likely to develop with the development of the metaverse, simply because in order to purchase anything on the metaverse, you do need to have some form of digital currency. So it kind of, in that sense, goes hand in hand, especially because cryptocurrency and stuff fundamentally is the value of cryptocurrency depends on demand and supply. With the development of the metaverse, there is a very real possibility that the demand for cryptocurrency would go up. Therefore, it's an interconnected concept. But where, how, when it will reach this stage where we need to really be like focusing on it is unclear at this point, I would say.
But people are already buying virtual lots where they are building whether storefronts or meeting rooms or
conducting concerts,
having football stadiums.
We've seen this, like, this is the beauty of it. We've seen this, like, especially in the example you gave before about Fortnite. When you said like the skins, because I used to play the game. Mm-hmm. So if you were from season 1 or season 2 and you had a certain skin and you used to play with it in season 5, 6 later on down the stage, people would immediately recognize that, oh, this person comes from this season, so he's good, so he has an expensive account. So that skin can go back to it as an NFT. Or when Marshmello and Travis Scott did their live concerts on the game, this is an idea of the metaverse, which is, again, stuck in one server where other games like Call of Duty or any other game cannot join them, but still, they targeted millions of people or thousands of people in different areas at their homes in one place. And how everything is shifting, how everything is changing, and how people are getting accustomed to it is the beauty of it. And this alone just is the answer where there is no ceiling.
And one of the big things has been the pandemic. And basically everyone's been remote, and that's changed. We became so reliant on technology for interacting and have become comfortable with it, and that's where the metaverse takes things to another level. That shouldn't be underrated. So that's where I think we can see a place for the metaverse, because we've been experiencing a remote world in our lives for the last couple of years, and with the focus and investment, it's exciting to see what that will be.
If you or I or any of us had to now go back to a dial-up system, I'm sure I would lose my head. I would not be able to deal with it anymore.
Right, thank you so much for coming. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
We have a ritual when we want to end the episode.
Okay.
Is we usually do a high five. So are you guys down for a high five?
To each other?
To me, right here.
What's the 3 piece?
It's okay, we can high five.